Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled AND, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first coincidence miracle today is from another person who was stuck on the highway in a traffic jam, bumper to bumper. And they relate that they could see the line up front was certainly at least a mile long, and heard one of our past shows where some people in that condition took the time to say a prayer to calm the whole crowd. Everybody in the whole line certainly must have been as frustrated as he was. And he did say the prayer, and the traffic started to move again, just like the other story we reported on a while back. And then he said that he noticed a car that was right alongside him. It pulled in front of him, and its license plate had 4 number 5s, the number 5555. And as all of you may know by now, the number 3 5s is the number that reminds us of the grace of God, the presence of God, and the Holy Spirit. So I think the whole message here is he certainly was inspired to pray, because right after he finishes praying, a car right beside him that he didn't see until just now pulls up closer as the traffic starts to move, and he notices it has 4 number 5s on its license plate. The coincidence of that happening precisely at the time of prayer is certainly a coincidence that God's presence was there, the Holy Spirit was there. So I appreciate him sharing it with us, and I hope it helps you when you're in a traffic jam. Try it and see what happens. Maybe God is trying to get people to pray instead of just sit there and get frustrated. Our next miracle happened while I was promoting our 2 books and our radio show on our website. I was handing out cards to people, and I came upon a mom and dad, and they had their daughter, an 11-year-old daughter, with them at the time. And I told them about the books a little bit, and they asked me to tell them more. And I said a little prayer, a quick prayer in my mind, asking God to inspire me what to tell them about. There's a lot of things I could say about the 2 books and our radio shows. So I got inspired to give the father and mother 3 choices. I said I was inspired to do it, and I said I'm inspired to offer you 3 choices. Let me know what you'd rather have me do. I can tell you about the first wonderful miracle I noticed in my life 50 years ago. I probably had a lot of miracles before that, but I didn't notice them. And 50 years ago, I began to notice the miracles. Or I can tell you something a miracle that I recently noticed, even today, something I noticed today. Or if you like, choice number 3 would be I share something with you that might take a couple of minutes about something I recently got inspired to understand about the Bible, and I didn't understand it at all recently until just now. I've been reading the Bible for many years and never really captured my attention. And so they were interested in all 3 choices, and for some reason they got inspired to ask their 11-year-old daughter to pick of the 3 choices. And she was excited to do that. I'm glad they did that. I was happy to have an 11-year-old participate, and the parents trusted me to say something with the 11-year-old there. And so she chose number 3. She said, I'd like to hear about something you learned about the Bible recently. So that was wonderful. And so I began to tell them that I've recently noticed in the beginning of the Bible, in the Garden of Eden, God said to Adam and Eve, you could basically, we didn't say it this way, but basically do anything you want, but don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so one day recently, while I was in prayer time, I had an inspiration from God to focus on that. And I thought, golly, that kind of indicates that God doesn't want people to have knowledge, right? If God's telling Adam and Eve, don't eat of the tree of knowledge, whatever it's knowledge of, he doesn't want them to have knowledge or certain kinds of knowledge. So I asked God to inspire me, was I getting this right, that he doesn't want people to have knowledge, because it certainly sounds that way. He's telling them, do whatever you want, but don't eat of the tree of knowledge. Well, I got inspired with a wonderful answer. The answer I received in my mind was that God is the perfect source of all wisdom. Certainly he made all things. He's all-powerful. He's infinite. He's going to live forever, and he always was and always has been. And this is something we've learned over the last 7,000 years by all of the wisest people on the planet. They've confirmed and they've talked to God. They've had inspirations. God has appeared to many people on earth and told them many things. So we've learned all these things, that God is the source of all wisdom. He's all-powerful. He's almighty. And so he's the perfect source of wisdom. And the inspiration I got was that was correct. He did not want people to have knowledge. He wanted people to ask him. He is the perfect source of knowledge. And then I was inspired to imagine what would happen if our government in Washington, D.C., when they were meeting in Congress or the senators are meeting, if they would all ask God what to do and ask God what decisions to make instead of voting what their constituents are telling them to vote or what they personally think is a good thing. If they asked God for wisdom, what would happen? Presumably, if they all asked God what to do for our nation, God would inspire most of them with the same answer. I say most of them because some of them wouldn't believe the inspiration that they got in their mind. Some people are just not connected at all to God in any way and wouldn't believe. Or a lot of people are atheists, for example. They wouldn't even ask God. But imagine if everyone did, all people on the planet would ask God what decisions to make. We'd be making a lot wiser decisions instead of using knowledge that we've picked up over time. For example, I was also inspired to notice this. You graduate from college, let's say a 4-year college degree. You receive your degree, but the next season of students that goes into the college, they learn from different books because things have been updated. There's been new findings, new science, new technology. So the knowledge you get when you graduate college is the knowledge of that moment. Whether it's perfect or not is another question, but the publicized and respected knowledge of the moment is what you get when you graduate college. But more knowledge comes in the next session of, the next freshman year comes in. There's more scientific evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So therein is a good reason why you want to keep asking God what to do, and he may improve the knowledge you have already. And it makes a lot of sense to me. So I know in my mind, I asked for inspiration from God. I asked him to explain it to me. And the 11-year-old was totally delighted with this, and she expressed it, and we had a discussion like she was an adult of 25 years old. She said she hadn't heard that before, and she has a religion class that she attends in her whatever particular faith they're in, and she said she's going to bring it to the class the next week and tell the class about it. And she just thinks that, it's a wonderful answer for why God would say, don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Our next coincidence miracle is from someone else who has also experienced something that they're very happy about. They relate to us that most of the time when they're trying to park a car during the holiday shopping season in parking lots that are very busy, they ask God to help them find a parking spot, and they relate to us that very, very often they get amazing parking spots, or people pull out of their parking spots just as they pull by the front row. And we've gotten a few people over the last year telling us that this happens to them. So I have to encourage everybody out there, when you pull into a parking lot that's packed, it's a great opportunity to notice that God really cares about you in the most minor, tiniest things in your life. You wouldn't imagine maybe that God's interested in getting you a parking place, but he really is. And the way you prove it is you ask him to please inspire you what row to go look in and what place in the row to go look in, and then you follow your inspiration, and then you start getting spots. I mean, it's happened to me also, and it's happened to other listeners, so I'm glad to be bringing it up again. We have to do things like this. We have to entertain what other people are doing where they're noticing God. If they pray for parking spots and they get them, or they read the Bible and they get an understanding and they know God gave it to them, whatever they think God is doing for them, and that's the purpose of this show, whenever we hear those things, we should try them. I think we also shared how someone in a traffic jam prays that God will get the traffic jam to clear up and start moving. Maybe they've got an important meeting to go to and they need to get there on time. So when people tell us these stories about their coincidence miracles, and I hope you're getting this value out of this radio show every week, we need to try the same things, and that's the purpose of this show. We've had, I guess 150 weeks of miracle stories so far, and if we keep trying all the things all these other people are trying, we're going to experience a lot of miracles too, and that's the whole point of this show. We want everybody, all of us on the planet, to become acting like God's friends, because in fact he did make us, created us to be his friends, and we're not preaching that message. We don't tell people you're supposed to act like a friend of God. If you have a problem, ask him for something. He's willing as a friend to help you. Our next coincidence miracle is an amazing story. A caregiver relates to us that she was caring for a terminally ill patient who unfortunately was pronounced deceased one day, and they called a family in to come in and do what they ever have to do to wrap up and for the wake and the funeral with the undertaker, etc. So the family came in to do that. And just as the family came in, or very close to the time the family came in, the caregiver is telling us that she was there, and the patient was revived, came back to life miraculously. Nobody was doing anything to the patient. They just woke up. And the family was delighted that that happened, certainly. Well, the person, and the caregiver was there to hear this, the person couldn't resist telling everybody what they had noticed when they passed on into the other zone, wherever we go after we die. And hopefully we go to heaven directly. But they were relating that they met some family members. They had discussions with them. I don't know how long the person was deceased, but I've heard other stories like this, and sometimes people who deceased only for 10 minutes tell us amazing things they learned. It sounds like they were there for an hour. So I guess when you get into heaven, 15 seconds in heaven would appear to us like, maybe a whole week's time. But it was an amazing story. They came back to life, and the caregiver is relating the story to us. And by the way, we've had at least 2 more stories like this I can remember over the last couple of years. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.